Yeah.
Having that kind of
That's what Daniel said. It's like,
classes.
Yeah.
Very
That's
hard.
what that was really kind of
This is
made
what I was trying to say
a
yesterday.
lot of sense for my experience. Oh, okay. There was never going to be any
No, I'm not going to come on. I'm not going to.
shared understanding.
Yes, what? Yes, Karen.
So, have you heard of Colonel Kurtz?
No.
She is the ultimate defender of Maryland Manson against sterile seculations.
And I'm the second.
Nadine, Tad.
So I have the privilege to chair the final session, which has no speakers.
It's my idea of a gift.
Thank you. So when I was thinking what the ultimate goal of my chairing of this session should be, besides asking the ultimate question to close down the conference, I was thinking I can still ask the question, but what I can do as well, I can sort of like fill in the intro to the question with my own little bit of a reflection on COVID-19, a very quick one, which I think kind of shapes the standpoint from which I would ask the closing question, which kind of fits in my doom and gloom visions of what would become of individual European states, which I would sum up as its own versions of Serbia of Alexander Vučić. But if I go back to explain the standpoint from which I would ask this question, if I go back to the 2020, to the year, I spent it in a country which was run by a radical right-wing cabinet of a Slovenian liberal populist, Janez Janša. So ultimately my experience of COVID measures was that of a government that was already run by far-right religious fundamentalist sympathizers, and that were imposing the same kind of measures as liberal governments elsewhere in Europe and other parts of the world. And it was marked by massive corruption scandals, buying protective masks and other COVID-19 related tools at unprecedented prices from the state budget, which eventually, just like Toby, Tad and others were mentioning, eventually helped topple the cabinet of Janez Janša in the next regular elections in 2022. But while I was there in Slovenia, it also happened so that my wife actually worked in the health sector. So I had the fun time with 3 kids being at home, and my wife having every day gone and working as a nurse at a senior house, and she was wearing not just a mask, but actually a full gear. So she actually looked like an astronaut, literally. And she had to work in it all day, 12 hours a day. And they had extensive emergency working hours. So this wouldn't be like you could take a break. You would just be in it for 12 hours. You could maybe take a break during lunch so you could eat or drink, or maybe in the toilet. But so that alone, to me, was an absolutely novel experience. And this was followed by the summer of 2021, after this winter, which he spent working at a senior house in 2021. The summer was almost like a relief. So we went to visit our family in the Czech Republic, and the next thing we did, we actually did what many, even though we're a Czech family, what many Slovenian families do, and we did a trip down south to the other countries of former Yugoslavia. So we went down south to Croatia, Bosnia, and in Bosnia I actually met my U.S. family, which is a family from my dad's side, my dad's sister, who are Americans since 1960s, and basically the invasion of Czechoslovakia by the Soviet troops. And there we met in Medjugorje. So for those of you who don't know what Medjugorje is, the quick answer is that it's Catholic Las Vegas. Wow. And guess what? Cool. It's a Catholic shrine, although it's not officially recognized by Vatican or a Catholic Church as a site of a regular miracle. It's just a tolerated miracle, so to speak. And where the Virgin Mary appeared, pilgrims come to the place where she appeared, talk to the children, and they pray rosaries, but the Catholic Church has not yet recognized, there's a hope that they will one day recognize, that she really appeared there. In any case, my point is that when we came there, guess what happened? There was no COVID. There were no COVID measures, there was nothing. So, and you know, obviously it kind of made me intrigued, and I kept asking locals, so how was the COVID here? You know, and the response usually was, we didn't have any. We had Virgin Mary, we prayed, and that was it. She protected us. So this kind of, you know, shapes my path towards finally asking this question, because when I reflect on those years, I already experienced a government that was openly flirting with far-right aspirations or religious fundamentalism, and I saw that they did, not just that they imposed, were more than willing to impose the same kind of restrictions as the liberal center. They were almost tempted to add to it, you know. So when I ask a question whether a precautionary authoritarianism become our unsurpassable horizon, to me the prospect of where we ended yesterday, can far right be any worse, is like, yeah, they will be even worse. So to me this question is, how do I choose as a voter between a far right and a liberal center, which are, it seems to be in a way in agreement, except that far right is perhaps willing to go even further. And so this is the standpoint from which I would ask this question. And the question, of course, would be whether there is any political alternative to this. Maybe if I were to borrow the term that Klaus used, to this divided conflict that's essentially locked into these two camps. So, and I don't know, as we discussed with Toby on the way yesterday back to the hotel, whether the possible answer could be if left-wing politics can be resurrected, if it can be genuine, and that's maybe where I would start with this question.
Well, can I mean, I feel,
Or be free to amend it.
well, no, I'm going to I want to think about it, because I think that, you know, why is it then that the liberal centre and the right have similar, if in some ways qualitatively different answers to the problem of government in the 2020s? And for me, it comes back to some of the things I said in my lecture. I think it comes back to the crisis of computation and management of information. Government has, you know, we're all overwhelmed with information produced by machines, and you know, we all need to be authoritarian with our inboxes to manage it on a micro level, and government needs to be authoritarian with it on a macro level in order to manage the institutions which are created. And both have come up with a similar kind of an answer as to how to deal with that. But that would be my beginning.
Where else quick?
Well, I agree that it helps as a tool. I think it's a question of buyer principally, like would have been much earlier. And it's what we said, and it's what I think it was Tad was saying. I'm starting to mix up everything, but like if you give the example of having easy power, easy access to power under what it was certainly under the pretext of emergency rule, then every government loves it. Yeah. Emergency rule is just wonderful. Like it gives you all the power, no right to criticize, all is in your hands, and everybody even supports it because it's in the name of their own protection. It would be protection that becomes control. It's my care of control. So I think the AI things and other tools are kind of perfect for them, but it's not that they created this grab for power, it's just that they help it and magnify it, so it becomes even easier than was before. But the grab for power was always there. So I would bring back Foucault here. Foucault has been very missing. I mean, it's totally a Foucauldian situation.
So if I were to rephrase it in a different angle, is there a path to genuine politics after COVID-19?
They would have to, there was a saying yesterday, they would have to renounce the certainty and recover the notion of uncertainty. And our society is ready for that, that's another question. Are people ready to go back to a state where we didn't know for sure what what our governments are doing, what they can do? We accept that we don't control everything. Once you taste it to the control, I mean, it's the old securitization studies and like once you tasted control, everybody wants to keep it because it gives you kind of reassurance about life.
I want to come back to what Tad said. Is it control or is it a simulacrum of control? Because as Tad showed,
Yes.
people
Of course, it's
actually
simulacrum.
auto controlled first, and then government stepped in, and therefore we are in this curious situation where I think Baudrillard, people don't think, but I think Baudrillard, the simulation is something we have to consider. Can we return to politics in a world of simulations? I'm not sure.
No, I'm not sure either. But suddenly what we saw, like Johnson, Macron, Babiš, or whatever, like there were so many leaders, or Trump to start with, who thought spontaneously, well, it's a virus, there's nothing much we can do, let's just wait until it goes away. Which was a spontaneous and actually not such a bad reaction. And then they realized that people want measures, they want a simulacrum of control. So they say, you want simulacrum of control? Let's say the opposite what we said last week, give you a simulacrum of control. And now everybody's happy. And how do we bring them back? You would have to teach the people again that maybe we don't control life and death the way they would and I'm not sure it's possible, but maybe a psychiatrist can tell us what is possible.
Yes.
Should I, because I saw two hands raised, should I take questions or should
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
go as it comes? In any case, Nadine had her hand raised.
I did. I would really like to very strongly underline Tad's point again, and that has also been repeated, that the people retreating came before, and I think it's exactly for this reason that the politicians then said, oh God, I need to do something, I have all this power now to actually, give these people something, leadership, this kind of thing. And I think we really need to talk about the reasons why people retreated, because they had, in their millions and billions, they had scary pictures brought to them, to their eyeballs, to quote our American friend, by social media. It was and media. But I would like to probably give social media a stronger influence here, and maybe media influenced more by social media, because there was an absolute avalanche of fainting Chinese and mysterious danger, and I think it was a completely unprecedented, onslaught of this avalanche of scary, mysterious danger that was brought into people's homes and phones, and it was everywhere, and that's why people retreated. And if you want this not to happen again, we need to think about this, and we need to think about how we can get people to say, no, by the way, we will not stop seeing each other, and we will not stop breathing on each other, because this is what this is all about.
Yeah, but I think
I'll try to go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll because I
So
saw
the
the other.
Yeah, no,
Milan was the second one to have his hand raised, and then Tad.
Oh yeah, very many topics were already raised, so I'm tempted to comment everything, but sorry. When we question concerning liberals and populists, it's very practical for me. Well, we choose to live in Gallinism, California, and Ron DeSantis, Florida, which is Florida at the time of the COVID. So it goes back to the question discussed yesterday with Muriel, that liberals betrayed liberal values. What remained of liberalism is this kind of moralism only, whereas the famous text of Isaiah Berlin that you have two types of liberals, positive and negative, only positive remained, that we want to raise people, educate them, make them free. We force you to freedom, we force you to security, and this all of course should be part of political repertoire of liberals, but only a minor part. The protection of individuality should be on the first side. And Alan Kahn recently wrote a book about freedom from fear, that liberalism has three pillars: individualism, morality, and free markets. And it seems to me that Western liberals simply abandon these two, that only moralism, moral virtues remain, and then this kind of liberalism with only one pillar could not survive. And so return to politics, for me, requires, let's go back a little bit, to the sources of this liberal tradition, which is not one-sided and it's just very rich. But what are actually people like Newsom offering to people? I don't know, to normal people, not just for elites. And the next point regarding to manipulation. Well, the question we didn't discuss is why the Chinese brand is. Since it is definitely fabricated, and they manipulated numbers from the very beginning to show that the lockdowns were working, that this is the only way how to deal with the pandemic, that the virus is extremely dangerous.
I have a theory as to that.
Yeah, and so this is one topic I think it's worth still in researching, and another is the flow of Chinese money. And that the Western universities are also dependent upon foreign investments and then Chinese ties, and I wouldn't be surprised if Imperial College would be dependent upon Chinese investments.
They made the masks.
Yeah.
And tests.
They took the
And the
brand.
tests.
Tad was the next one.
Yeah, like this question of control is, I think, really, really central here. And like we have lived through a period where control has concretely been in our faces and in our lives and turned our lives upside down. But at a more abstract level, but it's real for every person. Actually, what control do we have as people? There was one piece of control if you're worried that virus is going to kill you or do something bad to you, and when nothing else is happening. There's one piece of control. You can sit at home and hide from it. You've got at least control over that part of your life. But we as human beings don't really have much collective control over our society. And by and large, for the last 200 years, what we've done is delegated it to a political class who stands above us, who largely is incapable of being creative and largely suppresses or administers, or Marx called it the formal negative administration of society. That's all the state is capable of. Like, it's not really capable of being super creative and making society better and so on. We shouldn't expect it to be that. But the problem is we are separated from that control. We have some control individually, but we are separated largely from any kind of collective control and collective ability to do things most of the time. And it's probably worse now because those social institutions, which gave us some partial versions of that, have all decayed and gone, and they're not around anymore as a basis for some kind of, trade union used to be able to do more to make your life better at work than it does now, where it's largely involved in legal disputes and occasional wage cases. And you're largely a passive person rather than the active unions where everyone was like really involved and active many years ago. So I think that control is the important issue for me. And so for me, the question is not, can we revive a new politics? Actually, we've had 200 years of various politics disappointing us. Maybe we have to look at trying to find ways to overcome this alienation. And I think we also have examples as recently as the Yellow Vests. All those, Toby was right, so many protests in 2019. I don't think there's a conspiracy to shut them down. I think they stumbled upon something that managed to shut them down. But all those protests were incredibly important. People were starting to exercise that. I don't see any reason why that's not going to come back at some point, because are people more satisfied now than in December 2019? Are they feeling better about the world? Are they more positive about their politicians? None of the above.
Andras,
Yeah, you mentioned this, and I agree with Isaiah Berlin's positive and negative liberty, and liberalism is now moving to the positive understanding of liberty, like control and a lot of dystopic writings and novels appeared on a sort of future healthcare dictatorship, and authorities will tell you how to live your life. Smoking should be banned, and alcoholic drinking, etc. So there can be a future when you are controlled and you have a right to a positive, clean, fit life. And it can be criticized if it is against freedom, of course. But if you remember the American Constitution, Jefferson wrote life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So life is there in the liberty credo as an important element, and but what he meant, I think, is the right to a dignified life, to have equally free, conscious, autonomous life. So So when they talk about life as more important than liberty, maybe we should say that what kind of life is more important. So it's some sort of, I think it's connected to autonomy and dignity. But it is there, so we cannot deny that it is part of liberalism to talk about life.
Unless there's a question, I would propose an, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Albin. I want to talk about what you just said about controls. I think this is so important. I mean, those of us who were in the UK during Brexit know that the Leave campaign's slogan was "Take Back Control." For me, this has to do with something which Juliette, who would really enjoy this discussion, has said to me, that we now live at a time where one of the reasons we feel out of control is we do not understand the basis of our lives. We don't understand how these things work. We don't understand the medicines we take. We have delegated actual control over our daily experience to experts, which is why there's probably a revolt against expertise, because we resent that on some deep level. And so I think that the process of the relationship with technology has led to a lack of control and understanding of how our lives actually work, and that's a big emotional impact on a lot of people. And I think that's something which is the seat of a lot of the alienation which is one. But that's Juliette's point.
Okay, Maria has a question.
I don't know. I don't want to anybody else to start. No, I was thinking maybe a beginning of a solution would be, to me, the whole debate about expertise in science, basically science being shut down. Like we are told what science is, so from the moment it's science, then we're supposed to shut up because science tells us, is of course a great perversion of science. We all know it. And actually, I do think of history as a science, as a social science. Not everybody does, but for me, history is a social science, and which means this is something I've been grappling with for 30 years, is methodology. There's like, you don't just tell any story, like science is not replicable like a hard science, but how you check that what the historian says is valid is because he or she will put forward their sources, will say exactly what sources they use, exactly how they use these sources, under what methodology, how did they choose to take or leave, how did they choose to interpret it. Like the whole process must be transparent, and that's exactly what I've been grappling with the Czechs for 30 years, about how you write communist history, because they know the truth, and I dare to disturb them, but like I'm bringing like, you know the truth, but where's your methodology? That was my very role at our institute. I was advisor for methodology, and I think it's a sign of the times, but after I led the methodological seminar, I call it like this, for 2 years, somebody came to me, wanted to be nice to me, and said, Mary, we don't need methodology. Because history is the truth, but it's exactly the same issue. Like we need, and that's what I would have asked you yesterday, if we had time, Max. It was about whether these experts who, these modelers, whether the word methodology even appeared. Because that's one way of bringing back this simulacrum of certainty by bringing back a real discussion about methodology. Like, if we have methodology, we can discuss it. If we can discuss it, we're back on Popperian tracks, so to speak, and not into this kind of simulacrum, not into Baudrillard, but back into Popper, so to speak. So, did that even appear, the word methodology?
As in the word, or were they conscious of the limits of their methods?
As a discussion, as a public discussion around the models.
No, but the modelers, as far as I can tell, were, like all scientists, were aware of the limits of their own methods. And when asked, why didn't you model economics, like economic costs, for instance, or why didn't you consider these things, they said, well, it's not our job. We're not economists. Which, to some extent is fair. We didn't have advice-giving institutions that forced them to confront economists making economic arguments. We had an advice-giving institution that allowed these people to take over the advice that the government received. So I think that, they were aware of the limits, but they weren't forced to confront the policy implications of those limits by the institutions in which they were embedded.
Yeah, because you remember the person I interviewed in Mike's Garden, who is anonymous, but is a specialist of models.
Oh yeah.
The first thing he told me, and within a very short interview, like I'm a modeler, I'm a mathematician, I know how models work, and what we are all aware of is a square cow model. What is a square cow? Is that well, models gives you a model gives you an image of reality. Like let's say you have a cow in front of you, and the model gives you a window on the cow, and we call it the square cow, because that's how much of the cow we see. So we know that we see only one square of the cow. We don't see the entire world. And for him, it made no sense whatsoever, all these models, because they treated it as if you saw the whole cow, whereas you only ever saw one square of the cow, the square cow model. And I think maybe that would be, by bringing back that particular discussion about methodology, would be a way maybe to get back into rationality and less of simulacrum and more of actual debate. I don't know.
Yeah. To the modeling discussion. I remember, and I have a screenshot of this, I remember there was a discussion very late in the game between a British journalist and a British modeler, in which the British journalist was very surprised to discover that the modelers had only modelled the worst cases because that was the only thing that made the politicians do something, have to do something. So the politicians weren't interested in, oh, if you don't do anything, but it was, I don't think I'm quite doing it justice, but I have the screenshot. So the journalist was like, "What? Well, what do you mean? You didn't actually do? You didn't present the cases where, oh, if you do nothing, actually there isn't going to be." This was late in the game, so not in the early stages. But if you didn't model the things that said, oh, if you don't do something, the world doesn't end, and the modeler said no, because that's not what the governments wanted to see. So there was also that little problem.
We're back at simulacrum.
Yeah, well, good job. I was going to ask you a question, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I would like to defend like mathematical models a little bit. There was like a Slovakian mathematical modelist, and then like within March, Niall Ferguson model happened, and he worked with him before, Richard Fuller, and he was like, oh, this is not good. Like what he's putting in the in the models and whatever, and he already knew like Niall Ferguson track record was not like one of the let's say like most accurate. So it's at least like to me it's visible, like there was even within like mathematical models community there was this like little bit, not like a pushback, but they were like, let's be skeptical about so I don't think it's like the mathematical modeling profession is like at fault, but it's apparently there's like lack of discussion why was this particular, of course Niall Ferguson was pushing for it, you always want your work to be the most important and most like visible, but more of the question is like why there were not like other mathematical models, and why there was like no pushback from the community, like we as a mathematical modelists we have a kind of issue with this sort of approach, and it was instead like basically applicated, he all made like a predictions for USA as well, and that was like apparently decisive, like why there's like, you never go with the like first paper, like okay, this is like interesting, so I'm gonna like where the opposing view, like that's a classic, right? That's a classic approach within history and the social sciences. Like for me it's like more important why there were not these questions, like I would not be like, mathematical modeling is like a fishy profession by design.
It's not a fishy profession.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I mean, I know a little bit about this because I have been talking to a few modelers over the years, and basically the problem was effectively, as you said, Nadine, it was the political decision was taken that a certain range of modelling were the models that were of interest. There were modelers who disagreed, as you said, Marianne, but they were just cut out of the discussion politically. So it's not so much the profession, it actually comes back to this question of control and the political framework.
Giving the impression of doing something, even when you know it's against, in fact, common sense. It's very weird.
There's also a much less sinister explanation, which is that Ferguson has been working for the government for 20, 30 years, and before him, Roy Anderson, who was his mentor, worked for government for 20 years. So they're just the go-to team. They produce these kind of easily digestible models that government relies on. It's just a kind of institutional continuity there.
And as you know, Max, also everybody within the infrastructure of British modelling is kind of deferring to
Yeah, it's a very small world.
Academically, he was at the top of it.
Yeah, and another important difference is that for whatever reason, during swine flu, I mean, this is incomplete research, so based on a single interview I did, but during swine flu, it seems to me that the modelers were forced to compete with one another on the advisory team. The guy running these meetings forced them to argue. Whereas there was none of that during COVID. They were able to form this like little clique and like whip each other up into a fury. Whereas, during swine flu, there was this much more competitive. They were trying to undermine one another.
If no one has a question, I have two questions.
Yeah, I have only like small, like, you know, you both said like Niall Ferguson is an established authority for over 20 years. I'm just gonna ask you, I had it, from your book or from Macedo, like he was apparently like mistaken again and again.
Every single time.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter. He just because he had the connections to get big grants, everybody was dependent on him within the infrastructure of modelling research in the UK. Therefore, they were just a person.
We're back at follow the money.
So on that note, since we didn't have enough Foucault, if I recall correctly, in the final 15 years of his life, Foucault refined his ideas of power into urging his followers or readers to look for power where it is really located. And when we're speaking about whether a liberal can or the far right can, it seems to me the part of the issue or the part of the way to surpass that sort of unsurpassable horizon could be to look for novel ways to locate or analyze where the power is. And it seems to me the far right, they have this, I would almost say, by now almost too general and anonymous anti-elitist discourse, which we saw also has its own limits. And then the liberals, perhaps they resigned on identifying power altogether. And I've always been asking myself this question, as Maria would be a good person to respond, but if others want to jump in, why is left not capable of identifying power in the post-college politics and addressing it to attract voters?
Oh, I have a theory to that too.
Maria, go ahead.
No, I don't want to.
Unless somebody else has the urge.
Theory should come first.
Methods.
Well, there are several of us here who are specialists of communism, of communist history.
I have a question on that too.
Yeah. And haven't we studied for decades how intellectuals love power, love hubris, love to tell others what to do because they know what is best for humanity. They know what the best path is to singing tomorrows and bright future and so on. And so they just found yet another opportunity. We were just, I think, literally delighted. Absolutely, like this hubris and this moral virtue and virtuous signaling and standing in absolute awe about themselves and how they do the right thing and they disinfect things because they care about others, whereas these crazy people who want to work, they just want to kill gravity and they want to kill everyone. And so, I mean, I think it was to me, it was like I'm back literally into the books I'm writing and the books I'm reading forever. So intellectuals just love power. Is my explanation.
I could move it to the left, like more specifically to social democracy. I think there was an issue, it was an issue in Czech Republic, it was definitely an issue in Europe. Like basically there was this theory, like maybe it was like Dahrendorf, I don't remember correctly, like social democratic program won. Like everything was done, everything is covered, we have healthcare, we have social system, and all of a sudden we are kind of like, satisfied, but a little bit like, not like tired, but kind of like, our work is done. Let's go to sleep, which for me was like always like amazing, like idea in the 90s, 20s, because it's you can say like it's about the workers, but for me like left is always about the marginalized society, and you can always look like they are huge. You can like put it to gender, you can put it like to racism, in a proper way, not like this like identitarian adventure signaling that Afro American won an Oscar and it's a huge step. I was like super fed up. It was actually mentioned yesterday, like Barack Obama. We can fuck up. So like, but I think it was this idea. When like social democracy like within Europe was like, we like the social cohesion, we like the basic fabric of society. Let's put public schools, public health. It's all good. but economically, let's move to the right. Like, you know, this was this like idea, like tripartite, like, you know, labor unions, politicians, and private sector. Like, you know, let's cooperate. Let's go. How is it like in American Congress? It's like working behind the aisle or something.
Oh yeah, across the aisle.
Yeah. You know, there's like classic, like Republicans say to Democrats, like, go to hell, and Democrats' response is like, you know, maybe we can like work together and reach some like reasonable, you know, compromise. And then like we end with mutants like Obamacare, and which basically it was like a Republican idea in the very beginning, and then it became like even more Republican. So it was this like sort of like left, and you know I'm too young to experience that like that atmosphere that was like within like 80s and 90s. I know like labor unions were definitely here, and I'm of course like a huge sympathizer to labor union. But maybe like in the 70s there was this like fatigue, and even like labor unions became this like institutions, routinized power and all of it. So, you know, like leftist program, social democratic program, like kind of like lost its way, you know, if it makes any sense.
Makes sense to me, but yeah. But I think so it's like what we said in this podcast with Oliver Davis, if you remember.
I don't remember what we said.
We said, or I said, that's the way I remember, that I think the left still hasn't recovered from the fall of communism, quite simply, because even if the left was not, even if the moderate left was not communist in Western countries, there was this idea that the left is sort of guaranteed that there is something strong there, and even if we don't support the Soviet Union, the left is there to stay. So you know we have like some legitimacy in fighting it. And after '89, when communism collapsed in Central and Eastern Europe, what we discovered is that the people didn't enjoy the left whatsoever. What they wanted was more capitalism, more purchasing power, more freedom to consume as much. There was this consuming explosion. And the left took a terrible hit also in the West, because what are you to propose then to your workers? If everybody wants to consume, and you see that even people who lived all their life under socialism, all they want is the left has nothing more to offer for a while. They were like completely lost. And I think what the solution that came up is an identity thing. Like, let's offer wokeism, that's identity politics, let's defend minorities. Like, it's where the left reinvested its resources, intellectual resources, which we are clearly seeing the end of now, because it's just going nowhere. It's like it's becoming even more dogmatic than, you know. It's going back.
And what if the left turns to Latin America for rejuvenation? Because Eastern Europe is dead now in that sense.
Well, I mean, Latin America, I think more globally, it's what the interesting thing for me politically that we can take some heart for is that not only in Latin America but in other countries around the world, there has been a genuine old-style left which has come through in the last few years. So I mentioned Colombia, where, as a Colombian friend said to me, you know, that Petro would never have been elected without the economic disaster of COVID in Colombia. It was a complete catastrophe economically, and Petro would never have been elected without that. In Senegal, that regime, which was extremely authoritarian and unpopular, would never have given up power without the popular distress which the COVID measures caused there, and the new government there. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So there are internationalist left, genuine left.
Maybe we're missing Spaniards in the room, and if they were here, they would point out that in Spain we were talking about Europe, and we have a genuine left power.
Yeah.
Which is quite fragile then.
Yes, although they've been in power for 2 terms, if I recall correctly. No?
It's a very hodgepodge coalition.
Yeah.
But compared to the presence of left in politics in other countries in Europe, it's a major success.
Yes, that's true.
Sure,
Well, since you made that, to me, a very interesting comparison to the normalization era of Czechoslovakia of 70s and 80s in your presentation, which I think is very highly relevant. András also made a similar comment, I would say, in that direction. It's like communism in Hungary, in a sense that we're talking about societies which were depoliticized, where ideology was no longer instrumentalized because all the actors in society knew that ideology is completely hollowed out. So not even those in power wanted to use it because they didn't want to look ridiculous. So I would actually very much agree with this, as I said. But at the same time, I would probably maybe challenge it or push it a little bit. And I would perhaps argue that, in a way, maybe even a better example of today could be the Serbia of Alexander Vucic, where you have a power establishment which has been there now with Viktor Orban on the way out. It's going to be a power establishment which has been holding on to power for the longest in Europe. And they've been able to use these techniques, but I would argue innovate them, to manufacture consent and to even withstand several waves of mass protests, which in any other European country might have been completely unprecedented. So the question would be to Vlada and Jovana, what would you change in Serbian politics if you could, if you had the power? To,
as I said, yes.
It's impossible, I know.
As I said.
The reason I'm asking, because just to finish it, and then I can't wait to hear your comments. But just to very quickly finish it, the reason I'm asking, I'm sort of trying to force you to give warning to the Western European or other Central European countries of where this hybrid regime politics of depoliticized society can lead to very easily. And as I mentioned in my doom and gloom dystopian visions of Europe, this is one very realistic possible path that Europe can take.
Oh, great.
When Andras said that Orban has a holds permanent state of emergency since 2015, I think we live a little bit more and even worse since 2012. And actually Serbia is still ruled by Alexander Vucic, who supports, who was supported from Brussels, Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and so on. So I told Toby during the pause that during the COVID-19, the head of the crisis headquarters was the Dr. Zlatibor Lončar, whose nickname was Dr. Death. He was associated with notorious Zemun clan, who killed Prime Minister Đinđić in 2003. And that Dr. Death is still Minister of Health in Serbia.
Great.
Yeah, great. He will maybe see. So I would rather change the opposition because I realized that they both work on the same project as I tried to show yesterday. You know, not only on COVID, but it's a kind of wrestling match that lasts for too long.
Ivana?
So there's no optimism.
There's no, when it comes to Serbia, it's very hard to build optimism. But in a way, this to me is not just scary, but it's triple scary because I will repeat myself. It sort of points to this direction of how far the depoliticized politics can go to, and in the end, it just creates this more sophisticated version of the normalization article.
Actually, I have a question for you.
Okay.
An accusation.
It's Jovana's turn.
Yes.
Jovana gave the answer. Immediately. I mean,
Where do you start?
You will be Prime Minister.
I will be Prime Minister. Not my style.
Campaign.
No, not my style. It's a hard question, and I'm afraid that I don't have the answer. I was wondering actually about Orban's state of emergency, how in practical terms he managed to do it. Because he was chosen on the elections, so you can say there's democracy. So in the same way,
And cooking the
so-called hybrid.
cooking the frog, yeah.
the frog.
And on the same way, you had the elections in Serbia, the government was chosen, and then we can ask further question, were there any changes in the laws that regulate the elections or no? So it's a really complex, and Mladen also gave part of the answer, like in which term, who supports him, actually, him who supports the government, and actually at this particular moment, I don't know what the polls would say, how many people is really supporting the current government, and how many people is actually supporting of the opposition, and what's the people's real opinion about the opposition. So it's really hard question, and I think that we can devote more than one conference in search for the answer.
To me, one very big aspect of this is the control of the communication channel, the control of the media, which today means to a large extent control or the uncontrol of the algorithm and of social media. Would you agree, or I mean, is there a way that?
Yeah.
Because I mean, just very quickly when I just I'll just give a few examples from Serbia. Yeah, basically there is a regulator in the Serbian media environment, but that regulator is a regulator basically just in name. Am I correct? It doesn't really regulate anything.
Emera, did we speak yesterday about United Media and three huge media groups in Serbia? They are all under the state control.
Exactly.
That's the end.
And those that are not are part of the kleptocratic or oligarchic circles that are attached to the government.
Sorry?
The remaining outlets that are not directly owned by the government.
Such as?
Vreme?
I don't agree. Mide Peščanik, I was writing for them, the extreme liberal photo, and I don't know. It looks now they are on the very same project.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
But it's true anyway in ever more countries that
Yeah.
there's in fact one group, one big group.
That's actually why I'm asking this question, because in my assessment, in the Serbian case, it's developed the furthest. So in a way,
Well, the Czech case is pretty advanced.
it's very absolutely, it's very advanced as well. And you can see that the key private actors are actually, in my opinion, they're using very similar techniques of manufacturing consent, of flattening the discourse into united whole, as we see in
Which is
Serbia.
where my question and my accusation to you comes next. you work partly for the media.
Yeah.
What the fuck have the media been doing this entire time? Like, why are the media not
Madam, you need the
questioning?
answer. They work for the power.
Yeah, I mean, is that the role of the media to work for the power?
No, but look, since we spoke about the Czech case, I'm throwing the Slovak case as well. You have basically 2, 3, 4, at most 5 oligarchic groups that control the media.
But it's getting through even a friend. Okay.
And then none of these, and this is where I think Foucault would come in handy, because this is where we're talking about where the power is. It's not in the politics, and that's why the politics is hollowed out, perhaps, maybe.
Indeed.
Because the power has been shifted in an unprecedented scale to the when it comes to modernity to the private hands.
But also, it's no longer the nation state; it's transnational.
Yeah,
The nation state is
but
itself
and this is a huge paradox,
Yeah.
which I think we discussed it with we touched it a little bit with Milan, which I think is requiring a novel, or at least our own efforts to adapt terminology to it. And we cannot, in a way, no longer speak about modernity, or not even about postmodernity. So, in this sense, I was telling Milan, I would probably opt for a term, something like metamodernity, where you have parallel developments of collective identity, of collective consciousness. And in these parallel developments, you see how certain modern features prevail, but then even older features, perhaps.
I mean, for me,
So
I'm sorry to bang on. I think it's deeper than that for me, because I think that the real issue for me is that, and I'm sorry to come back to computation, but I do think that computers have changed the goalposts of our fundamental theories. Let's take one which most people in this room are sympathetic with: surplus value. Surplus value is dead, because economic value is no longer produced by labour. Economic value is produced by algorithms and the digital world. The theory of surplus value no longer holds, and yet we all use it. And the same is true with the nation state. It's an empty shell.
It doesn't make any sense.
The speed of communication has meant that transnational power has adopted the reins of political power. And yet we still indulge in fiction. It is an indulgence, really, because none of us really want to try and, well, maybe we can have 30 years to try and develop a new theorisation to deal with this, but that's what's required.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, the nation state,
Even I
as a
agree.
word,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can I just challenge that slightly? Because one of the things that we have talked about is like with the COVID regime, but the thing that kept coming up in everyone was sort of national pride, countries, competition between different countries. Obviously, they're all trying to do the same thing, but there was a real sort of competition there. Like, we want to be the best. Like you were in Ireland, weren't you? And they really want to be better than England because Irish, hate the English, and the Kiwis wants to be better than Australia because. So there was that. So I see your point. It's not what it was.
Nationalism and the nation state are not the same.
Yeah. Well, it's like we live in a world full of nations. So I think that still they play a part, don't they? So I just sort of think it's they do exist, and what we're seeing, aren't we, with this sort of Brexit and these protests, is actually a lot of people feel disenfranchised from the nation state. Yeah. So that's and then they protest in these kind of quite unpredictable, sort of like not quite intellectual ways, and so I think, and then they kind of get cascaded, because like climate change at the moment, there's a big sort of movement against net zero, and it's sort of that's been sort of labelled as far right. So that's like it, but actually, the intellectuals are saying no, but we do need to fight climate change.
Mike, isn't the reason that people are feeling disenfranchised? I would say precisely because the nation state no longer has power to. Yeah, and that would be my.
But at the same time, it's still a powerful ideological tool because it's used by political actors.
Yeah.
And then we're coming back to this paradox: why political actors are in a way hollowed out, but at the same time still wielding ideology of yesterday.
Yeah. Well, because they need it to survive.
Because it's useful. Because it's.
And we have the rally around the flag effect as well, isn't there? So it's still, like I said, I think it's still powerful.
That it kind of reminds me of religion in late in the early modernity. It was there, it was very powerful. It no longer made sense.
Yeah.
Can we hear your opinion about what you asked regarding the political situation and development in Serbia?
I'm trying to shape my opinion, that's why I was asking you.
It's basically pessimistic.
Yes, it in a way has to do with this idea of this obsolete idea of a nation state, which I'm kind of hoping. And this is, again, if I were to try hard and employ optimism, which I am not sure will prevail. But okay, let's just, for the sake of it, try to be optimistic. And if there was a supranational administrative structure, a workable supranational administrative structure, would have better tools to address the issues of today. And if there was such a structure, it might be, or it might have the power to undo the power capture in Serbia.
Supranational, like above the national
Yeah, like
level.
for instance, you will now you will give me a frown. Like for example, the European Union.
That I wanted to ask, like.
But I know that in case of Serbia, this sounds a little bit ironic because it has repeatedly failed.
Or something like Federation in Star Trek, like.
Yeah, thank you. With the European stars on it.
On this, I think we should, I don't know if it's a good end or a bad one, but I think we should end. So let me remind you that we are going to put together a special issue of a journal. I don't know which one yet, it depends on who is interested, but if you are interested in contributing something, let me know, and I will figure out who to address and how and when. And for the rest, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you.
And if you have time to grab a sandwich before you leave, there are delicious sandwiches that I chose myself.
Based on every other discussion that we've had,
Yes.
they come highly recommended.
Yeah, I have to find one.
That was fun.
Nice to meet you.